Hi, Elena.
Hi, Puneet. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Trying to wake up.
Okay. Yeah, I think this works fine. That's good.
Hey guys, how are you? Both of you?
Hey, buddy. Doing good. How are
Hi.
you? Nice to see you.
I'm good. Elena, it must be really early for you in the day.
not too early, but just early enough.
Of course. And Puneet, how about you? How's it going?
Yeah, going good. Sunny afternoon outside. So, yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as the meeting is over, I'm running out.
Of course, yeah, it's a very pleasant day even in Amsterdam today. It was raining until I think past like 2 hours back, but now
Okay.
yeah, it's
No,
nice.
no.
You're still in London, right?
Yes, I'm in London. Yeah, very familiar with Amsterdam. Actually, I used to live in The Hague. I lived there for 1 year. So, yeah, Amsterdam is a familiar place.
Ah, nice. All right, so we're just waiting for a couple of more people to join, and then we'll start sharp at 4 p.m. my time, 7:30 IST, and Elena, for you, it's going to be 9 a.m. Right? Yeah. And for Puneet, it's going to be 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Got so many time zones, and we've got like people joining from all across the globe today, so it's
That's awesome.
yeah. I'll mute myself meanwhile, just gonna be fixing a few things in the deck. And if you want, you can also turn off the video. We come back in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Sure.
Saturday all right. Hey guys, can I request you all to mute yourself? I think you joined us muted, but then some of you unmuted. Can I request you again to mute yourself, everyone? We're gonna start now. Welcome to MBA and Beyond, Coffee with Us, like every fortnight, that's what we do. I'm Paridhi, co-founder of MBA and Beyond, and we've got people all across the globe today. We've got two amazing speakers with us. Give me a minute, I'll introduce both of them to you in a bit. And we're going to be tackling how should you be approaching round one, since the countdown has already begun and you know the deadlines are just around the corner. So we're going to be addressing most of the most troubling and tricky questions that we get asked the most, and that's how we've defined the agenda. The first one in the list is going to be tips for authenticity in your MBA essay for T15 application. how to tackle your applications when you fall in an underrepresented or an overrepresented pool, how to choose your target, reach, and safety schools. That's like a dilemma, and how should you spread them across early action round 1 and round 2. That's what we're going to be discussing in detail. How do you increase or maximize your chances to bag huge scholarships? And what role will your GMAT, GRE, and GPA play in your entire application? Tonight, today, afternoon, morning, we're in different time zones. Our speakers with us are Puneet and Elena. Let me introduce Puneet to you. Puneet is an incoming MBA candidate at London Business School right after completing his postgraduate studies from IIT Bombay. So all you IIT Bombay people possibly know him. He joined a global energy company, Shell, where he worked across the technical, strategy, and finance functions. Living in 3 countries and engaging with colleagues all over the globe has helped him develop strong interpersonal and leadership skills. Puneet understands the role of a great consultant in helping you navigate the long marathon that is your MBA application journey. According to him, a great consultant is the one that strikes a perfect balance between a coach and a thought partner. Second on the list, our speaker is Elena Guerra. Elena is a dynamic leader and consultant with an extensive, successful background in strategic consulting, college, and career advising. Her degrees are in management and higher education, and she's a certified educational partner. Additionally, she serves as a facilitator for the Houston area Berkman International Consultants Group. When evaluating MBA candidate profiles, she knows the greatest value is found beyond surface level. Elena knows where to deep dive in order to create a cohesive story which showcases an applicant's strengths and also helps them understand the areas where they could most benefit from. Welcome to the session, Elena and Puneet. The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Praditi. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to get started in this, conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the warm introduction, Praditi. Looking forward to the session.
So I'll just get us started with the tips for the MBA essay. So I tried to break it down into, some really relevant little concise tips, but Puneet, please jump in with, anything you want to add. So first of all, the prompt verbiage. As we all know, different schools are going to have different prompts. So it's important that you really explore each one, that you sit with it, take your time.
Guys, could we request you mute yourself? I'm trying to mute as much as I can see, but it's a long list. Back to you, Elena.
No problem. We all have lives happening. Very understandable. So for the prompt verbiage, the wording, just make sure you're looking at it closely, that you're looking at exactly what they ask. And also don't be afraid to ask for feedback from family, from friends. Often when schools are asking about accomplishments or obstacles, we often estimate ourselves in certain areas. So it's always good to get different perspectives. And next, I would say get personal. So this is an opportunity to show who you are. Not everyone is going to be able to get an interview. So consider this in some ways your interview, to show them who you are on the human side of things, not just your resume. This isn't, where you want to go on and on about data points in your resume. It's so they can explore you and your personality. And then finally, be yourself. Stay true to yourself and your style. Be confident in that. I know it can be awkward because we're not often asked about who we are, even in job interviews or throughout our careers. So sometimes this is one of the first times we're being asked to be this vulnerable and open, and so it can feel tempting to portray something that is not authentic to you, to feel like you are going to fit who they're looking for. But I would advise against that. Stay true to who you are. These people read hundreds, if not thousands of applications each year. They're able to tell when you are not being authentic. So it's very important that you stay true to your voice. Puneet, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I think it's a good summary. Just maybe one point. I think being authentic, I feel it's very underrated yet very important skill. And the reason I say this is being authentic in your application is not just going to help the admission officers, but it'll also help you, because remember, the whole application journey, it's a long marathon. It just doesn't end with, let's say, first set of essays. After the essays, you'll probably have a video interview, then you'll have interviews with the alumni or the admissions committee members. And then you may have to write additional essays as well for your scholarship. And hence, more authentic you are, easier it is for you to sort of jot down those points, connect those stories, and present a coherent picture. Because ultimately, I feel the objective of the whole application process is to show alignment in your thoughts, your writing, and your speech. And I think being authentic is definitely going to help you get that out of your mind and just put that in your application, and hence very important.
Absolutely. I think that takes us well to the next slide, which is, kind of important to bring out unique traits. So I think you obviously have the best perspective on this one.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think this is one of the most frequent question that we get asked quite a bit. And I completely understand the context, and that's why I probably will start with somewhat of an unpopular opinion, which is I do not agree with a blanket statement that a certain candidate, the whole application from that particular candidate is represents the over-representativeness. Because let's take an example, right? Looking at the audience, let's take the example of a typical Indian male engineer who's done his engineering and now been working in let's say, an IT or a tech role for the last 5 years. And let's compare that against INSEAD Business School, right? So if you look at INSEAD, they clearly highlight on their website, they're looking to assess candidates on 4 criteria: admission, academic capacity, ability to contribute, leadership potential, etc. Now, let's say an Indian male engineer with 5 years of work with, let's say, average GPA and GMAT, it just means that probably the academic capacity part, that's where a lot of people. Let me try and mute.
Guys, can you, so I'm trying to check who is not muted, but can you please mute yourself, whoever just joined?
Yeah.
I believe, I think, yeah, all right, go on.
Yeah, no, so what I was saying was, again, if you look at your academic background against all the criteria that the schools are looking for, it just means that in one of the aspects there, you belong to let's say, a pool where there are a number of applicants. That just doesn't mean your entire story is overrepresented, right? There are other attributes as well: leadership potential, extracurriculars, your goals. Those are unique stories, and what you need to do is craft a story based on those aspects of your profile and show your underrepresentativeness in all those other attributes. And that's how sort of I would go about it.
I don't really have much more to add. I think you did a great job of representing, of talking about that. I absolutely agree. There's almost always something, unique or underrepresented in everyone's story. I also want to emphasize that working from a US capacity, it's not just exclusive to Indian male engineers. There are, overrepresented groups everywhere. And so the key is, like Punit has said, just really digging into your story, asking for different perspectives, and you will find something that makes you stand out from the rest. So I'm going to tackle the underrepresented, the other side of things. Very similar advice and tips as Punit was talking about for his kind of side of things. I often, would fall into an underrepresented pool of applicants when I apply somewhere, but my advice would be absolutely embrace it, really dive into it, but don't make it the sole focus of your application. You should not at all dismiss the importance of other parts of your application. The entire application needs to be strong when you're applying to, these top 10 or M7 type of schools. Your entire application needs to be strong. So if you see, this underrepresentation in a certain area as sort of the magic key that will get you in somewhere, you're going to be in for an unpleasant surprise, because it's not enough on its own. You do have to be able to, one, communicate what that underrepresentation has meant to you. You have to be able to communicate how it's had an impact in your life, or how you have had an impact on others' lives or within your career, and how that underrepresentation has played into that. So it's not enough to just on paper be underrepresented. You have to communicate it effectively, either within your essays, your extracurriculars, or your interviews. So it's not as simple as just simply falling into a certain demographic. So don't make it the entirety of your application. Really focus on all components, whether it's your GMAT scores, your extracurriculars. All of those things need to be in balance and need to be communicated well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just to close that thought, if you see the whole process for any schools you take, right, you will see that they're also trying to assess that, because ultimately they want to see a holistic picture. Otherwise, they would have just focused on one aspect of your profile, right? So you'll see it clearly in the admissions process. If it's not coming through in the essays, let's say they've only given you 2 essays option, right? And you don't feel that you're able to justify everything that you want to highlight in those 2 essays, then there'll be optional essays, there'll be video interviews, and there'll be many other sort of options to reflect all those aspects of your profile.
Exactly. All right, target, reach, and safety schools. So building a balanced college list is one of the best and biggest things, most important things you're going to do in this entire process, because it really determines, strategy. It determines how well you know your priorities, how well you know your goals, the school. Building that college list is a vital part of this. Actually, for the first 2 components, I think, Puneet, you're going to have the best perspective on this if you want to talk about those, and I can talk about the last one.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think before you get into the whole target, reach, and safety school categorization, I think your starting point should be asking yourself this question, which I've highlighted here. How important is it for you to get into your top priority school? So let's take an example. If you've decided in your head that, okay, Harvard Business School is where I want to go for my MBA. It aligns perfectly with my personal aspirations, professional background, and where I want to be. Then by all means, right, focus all your time, effort, energy in that particular school. However, if let's say your objective is to get into a good business school, right, and you're flexible in terms of the let's say whether it's Harvard or Stanford, Booth, Kellogg, LBS, etc., right? Then I think in that case, you should definitely go ahead with this target, reach, and safety schools categorization. And this doesn't mean that safety schools are not good schools, or they don't have the industry focus that you want to go ahead with. It's just for hedging your bets. And again, it's a long process, so why put all your eggs in one basket, right? And that's how we go about identifying these target, reach, and safety schools. Once that is clear, then I think the next step that you should do is focus on the quantifiable data points, right? How do you select which school goes in the target list, reach list, or the safety list?
Hey guys, whoever has just joined, please mute yourself. Even though I had automated this to mute, I think guys are unmuting themselves. Thanks a lot. Back to you.
Perfectly fine. So as I was saying, you just need to use these quantifiable data points to see where, let's say, your profile matches the, let's say, profile of admitted students, right? So, and you can use parameters such as GPA, GMAT scores, acceptance rate, industry preference, work experience, or just look at the profiles of your seniors who've gone to these schools. And you can clearly see whether your profile sort of is in that, let's say, average, hits the average scores and all these parameters, or if it's above that average, then that school becomes your safety school. If all your data points are slightly below the average, then maybe you can make that school as your sort of target schools. And that's how I would go about starting with that list.
So, and as you can kind of hear from Puneet, he has a lot of insight, knowledge into this kind of process. And that's why for kind of the last tip, I put ask a consultant. And that's, it's really not like a sales pitch or anything. I'm very serious. We other people who do this for a living, there are so many factors to consider when you are building a college list. You can ask people who have attended, you can ask people who work at the university, who have worked in admissions, all these things, but their area of knowledge is going to be very biased and specific often to either their own process or the school they worked at or attended. And often that's really the only frame of reference they have. So they're not going to be able to give as, comprehensive a view at the different factors that go into selecting schools. They're not necessarily invested in your personal requirements, your goals, your experiences, and how you're going to be represented within that applicant pool. So that is, consultants can specialize, or they do specialize within these areas. And so I just want to remind everyone to mute themselves. So because we specialize in these areas, we keep up to date with them, not just, once a year, but throughout the year. We are looking at what they are, a school's mission, their vision statements, how that's going to impact applicant pools, how COVID is affecting things, GMAT waivers, just there are so many things that go into it. So if you are wanting to build a genuinely balanced school list, you absolutely should be doing your own personal research. That is of the most importance, but it is also good to ask someone who literally does this for a living and who is invested in your outcome, is invested in learning your story and how that relates to the profile building, to the school list building. So that's all I would add there.
Yeah, the scholarship one, maybe I can take this one. I think I'll start with some general pointers, and then I'll talk about specific aspects that really helped me get a scholarship from London Business School. So on the generic pointers, I think if you look at if you just talk about the numbers, right? Let's take the example of London Business School. It admits around 500 students every year. So, and let's take, 2,000 people apply, maybe more. Out of those 500 gets admitted, and out of those 500, then probably 50 or 100 are getting a scholarship. So you can imagine how competitive this process is, because scholarship is admitted, it's given to the admitted students, which is already a subset of people who had applied. So the first point that I want to give here is the same factors that determine your MBA admit are going to apply for your scholarship as well, in most of the cases, because either the scholarships are given on the merit basis or the need basis, right? So for the merit basis, all the parameters are going to be the same. Building on just the example that I gave in the first question, right? If you talk about INSEAD, they clearly have highlighted they are assessing candidates based on their ability to contribute, their academic capacity, leadership potential, international experience, etc. Right? So in each of those parameters, you need to put your best application. So what you can do is, let's talk about academic capacity, high GMAT, high GPA, other professional qualifications. So just to show your academic rigor. Same goes for your leadership potential, all your achievements, examples of your achievements, or craft them very properly in your essays, so that let's say all the aspects of your applications are basically in the top quartile. The other point I want to mention here is around these factors. Some of the factors are, again, out of your control, right? Some of the scholarships are very country specific, industry specific, gender specifics. So there's not really much that you can do there. They are very specific to a certain pool. If you're part of that pool, you will apply and you'll be considered. If not, there are other factors that are in your control. As I gave some examples, right? Test scores, crafting your essays, putting together a coherent, unique story, showcasing your extracurricular examples. So that's what you should be focusing your energy on. And then I think this is, you probably have heard it other places as well. Apply early, right? There's a supply demand balance. Sooner you apply, there are more scholarships. and hence greater chance. And you will see the schools are also very open about this. They highlighted clearly that, in the initial rounds, you will have scholarships, but in the later rounds, you probably won't have access to scholarships. So apply early, apply to multiple schools. That really worked for a number of candidates that MBA and beyond is supported. So if you have, let's say, admit from multiple schools, which all are comparable, like you're fighting to get into a top business schools are also fighting to get the best applicants in their school, right? So if you have multiple admits, if you have an admit with a scholarship, you can always request the admissions team to consider your scholarship case. And we've seen colleges and these business schools, they are sort of kind enough to match the offer, or offer you something that really can help your case. So do that. And last point again, which sort of spans across all the themes, emphasize your underrepresentativeness in other categories. If, let's say, in one of the categories you feel there are a number of applicants with a similar background.
Amazing, Puneet. Yes, I would really like to add, because I get asked a lot, like, how many schools should I apply to? And the more you apply to, the more are your chances to get accepted. And the more schools you get accepted in, the higher are your chances, or you're in a better position to negotiate scholarships with schools. That is just a direct relationship with that. So make sure you are getting admitted to more and more schools possible if you really want to bag scholarships. I have a question for you, Puneet. Mauricia wants to know, I have completed 10 years of an IT experience in November 2022. Can I still target MBA in LBS? I mean, I have my thoughts, but Puneet, you can go for it.
Yeah, so again, first of all, we'll need to look at, let's say, the broader profile, because again, work experience is one thing. So if I just assess the work experience, by the time, let's say, you'll be joining, you'll be probably 11 years of or more of experience. That's on the higher side for a full-time MBA. Having said that, in London Business School, you will see people from 4 to 14, people with that experience being admitted there. So it's about your story, why you want to do it. Because at this, let's say, with this experience, the main question is going to be full-time MBA versus executive MBA, right? So if you can clearly demonstrate that from the work experience perspective, maybe executive MBA makes more sense. But what you're trying to do post MBA, you feel a full-time immersive experience is going to add a lot of value. And if you're able to communicate that, then I don't see a reason why sort of you can't be admitted to London Business School or any other business school for that matter.
Absolutely. As long as you have a very strong reason for why you need to go for an MBA and why now, you're all set.
Exactly.
Moving on.
So for GMAT, GRE, GPA, as Puneet talked about, these are very important components. They are not the entirety of the application at all, but they do play a very big role. And I know with COVID, there are still schools that are offering GMAT waivers and test waivers, things like that. I, however, would always recommend submitting a test score they will still do a holistic review, a comprehensive review of your application without it, but being able to submit a very solid GMAT score or GRE is going to show commitment and ability to that program. So, but Puneet, if you want to go ahead and kind of get started on these, I think you have the most recent experience with all of this.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, no, I'm going to reiterate one of the conversations I had with a student ambassador from London Business School on this topic, and he was very clear in his thoughts, right? So because he works with the admissions committee quite a bit, so he mentioned always remember GMAT is just one data point. In that academic capacity bucket, there are multiple aspects: GPA, GMAT, other professional qualifications such as test score, etc. So do consider that. And ultimately, I think you need to strike a balance between the amount of effort you are going to put in retaking the exam multiple times versus the focus you want to put on remaining application. Why I say that is, let's take the example of London Business School or NCR. Let's say the average GMAT is around 710. Your score is, let's say, around 700. and you have 2 months to go. So now you need to think about whether those 2 months are better utilized by, giving GMAT again, and maybe your score goes from 700 to 710 or 720, versus focusing on other aspects of the application, and then submitting it in round one, right? So you need to take that call. Looking at your entire profile, you can have engagements with the admissions officer as well. But I think this is very critical, because a lot of candidates, they spend inordinate amount of time in retaking exam versus focusing on other aspects of their application.
And this kind of goes with the prior slide and this slide, but when, this all comes down in a lot of ways to strategy, to, when you're deciding how many schools and what GMAT score you need to achieve and what roles they're going to play for various schools and various programs, it does all work together. So it is all part of a strategy. I know there are questions in the chat box that we will get to that, what if you have a lower GMAT score? How's that going to affect scholarships? How's that going to affect which round you apply in? And ultimately, again, it is kind of why it's nice to work with a third party like a consultant or someone similar, so that they can help you strategize and prioritize, not just your goals, but your candidacy and how that's going to impact applications.
All right, there's one question again, like since we're talking about GMAT, GRE, I think a couple of people are asking this, so maybe I'll put one across. With the GMAT score less than 700, is it better to apply in round one or take the test again to score better and apply in round two? So that's, I think Puneet kind of touched upon this. So that's a call for you to make, but maybe Puneet, do you want to add up to the points that you already said or talked about?
Yeah, no, I think the first thing is very profile specific, right? As I mentioned, GMAT is just one data point, so hard to, directly comment that, hey, under 700, what you should focus on. We'll need to holistically look at your profile, because there have been examples, and with MBA and beyond itself, right? Last year, we had an applicant with a 690 GMAT, got into London Business School with scholarship. And we've had examples from the other side as well, right? Very high GMAT, but didn't get sort of the interview call. So we'll need to sort of assess the profile, in more details before I make that comment. But there have been examples on both sides, so that that's not the sole factor.
I'd also like to add that don't take a GMAT score and your application in isolation. They have to go hand in hand. If you're like right now, if you would have like been asking this question early in January, you would have said, okay, you can tackle your GMAT first and then start working on your application. But right now, since we're approaching the deadlines, both round one and round two, you have to put in your application either way. You only submit your application when you're most prepared. If you think you want to reappear, continue to work on your application alongside your GMAT preparation. So that's just like simple tip that most of the applicants are following who are not sure about putting in their application in round one versus round two. All right, one more question. Okay, people want to know how is it to go for a double MBA? So the question is, can you also share your views and suggestions for double MBA, which is like a second MBA? I've done my MBA from India and I'm currently working. I am thinking of doing a double MBA from a B school in USA. That happens all the time. Over to you, Puneet and Elena, if you want to tackle this question, and then I'll add on to it.
Yeah, no, I can quickly maybe start and give my thoughts on this. So as Paridhi mentioned, there have been multiple examples. It happens all the time. Just that you need to be very clear in your essays. And usually we use optional essay to sort of explain that. Why go for second MBA, right? So there could be multiple reasons. So for example, in India, it's very common right after your undergrad to go for an MBA, right? So you probably did that. Hence, although that experience sort of was very helpful in getting you the job and whatever career progression you've had so far, but now at this point, you realize the value of studying, let's say, at an international business school with a diverse group of people. And there are other factors in terms of the post-MBA goal, the geography that you want to work in, right? So if you can talk about those motivations or those pointers, I think that's how I would suggest you should go about it. And yeah, people do it all the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's as long as you're able to clearly define why you are seeking a second MBA, and there could be a lot of reasons, different, could be a different industry, different network that you want to gain. Again, you've gained more experience, become more clearly defined on your long-term goals. As long as that's clearly communicated, it shouldn't be an issue as long as everything else lines up.
Yeah. All right. Divyanshu wants to know, when should I give my GMAT if I'm aiming for September 23 intakes? I can take that one up. If you're looking at early action and round one, you should have already taken your GMAT. But if you've not, it's no big deal. Good thing is that you've started preparing for it. You can tackle your applications alongside, and a lot of applicants hit the submit button on their GMAT just before they hit the submit button on their applications. If you're not able to get that score, you can always push it to round two. So you have that kind of window. Ideally, you should have taken GMAT by now if you were targeting round one. Anything, Elena, Puneet, you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, you've covered most of it. The other way to look at it is also the number of schools, right? So for example, if in round one, you are only targeting one school, and maybe then round two, you'll add a couple more. Then maybe, you still have time, because for one school, you will take 1 to 1.5 months, right? So from now, if you have 2.5 months, maybe you still have 1 more month, or 2-3 weeks for your GMAT, given I'm assuming you're already preparing for it. And then maybe you can put in, your application for your top school that, is your top priority in round one, and then a couple of others, or maybe more in round two.
Yeah. Hello, Puneet. This side Divyanshu.
Hey, Divyanshu.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. So Paridhi keeps skipping my question. Actually, the question was not when should I give my MBA. Rather, I have described to her what my profile is like. And it's not an IT. I've done my engineering from VIT Vellore in electrical, core electrical, and I worked for Siemens Limited for 3 years now. And like I have taken a leave for preparation of GMAT, and I am pretty sure I'll give it by August, or maybe let's say mid of September. Like I'm already done with the preparations. I'm just like focusing on questions right now.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm done with the theory part. So but my question to you is, since you are already about to go to LBS, congratulations firstly. Yeah. So can I know the difference basic between MBA and MIM? Because what I came to know from my research, I guess 3 years of work ex is fairly less for MBA, but it is more for MIM. So can you just let me know, should I aim for MIM from a very good college, let's say LBS, or MBA from a fairly medium college, let's say Rotman or Schulich? Because I've seen Schulich and or maybe let's say Monash, or maybe those kind of colleges, not the top 10 colleges, obviously Harvard or Stanford. So can you just let me know if I should target the top 5 MIM programs, or maybe let's say the 80 to 100 ranking of MBA programs according to my profile?
No, got it, Divyanshu.
And just to cut you short, I'm so sorry. Yeah, that was like a huge profile listed there. Puneet, you can of course give your tips, but I'd love to have like a one-on-one with Divyanshu to understand more about his profile, somebody from the team. But yeah, over to you, Puneet. Because that's
exactly. I was about to say that again. I think Paridhi is going to talk about the process as well. You've already given some pointers around your profile, what you've done. We would need some more information, right? As I mentioned, holistically, we want to have a look at this, and that's why in the process, Paridhi will talk about profile evaluation, content gathering, etc. But at this stage, what I can tell you is, again, you've done your research, but this is more a question of what is important to you at this stage. Is, let's say, your priority getting an international experience, right? Starting as an analyst, let's talk about London. So starting as an analyst at an investment bank, and getting that international experience, is that more important to you at this stage, versus do you want to wait maybe 2 more years or 3 more years, right? 6 years is average work experience for LBS. waiting 3 more years and then going for an MBA? So it's a very personal question, what you immediately want to do. And then again, more detailed answer, happy to give it after your detailed profile evaluation.
Yeah, Malab, right now, so I really want to go because I'm not satisfied with the pay scale I'm getting in India in this sector of industry. That is the core industry of electrical.
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
just not to deviate from the session's objective. Let's talk about your
Now,
profile.
if you can just answer the small question, MBA from a tier 2 college versus MIM from a tier 1 college. That's it. The last.
MIM from tier 1 college, just to answer your question at this stage.
So that would be better for me right now, right?
From the limited information that you've shared thus far, yes, correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Puneet. Congratulations again.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Divyanshu. All right, over to the next slide. But yeah, guys, anybody who wants to have like more detailed discussion about anything in your profile, feel free to schedule a session. Our profile experts would really love to dive deep into your profile and give you the best advice possible. All right, moving on.
So these are just some common mistakes to avoid. We've talked a lot about what you should be doing, what you should aim for to take into account in your process, but these are just some things to try and be aware of as you are applying. So the first one, comparison overload. Obviously, we want you to do your research. We want you to be informed. If you work with us, we are going to be giving you, examples of, a well-done application. We're going to be discussing that with you. However, when you do too much personal research, or you start reading, your friends' essays, your colleagues, there's going to be a lot of feedback and a lot of information out there, and it can run the risk of you unintentionally, starting to take on someone else's voice or style. And that is something you very much want to avoid, because then your application is not going to be consistent when, they see that you have one way of expressing yourself, let's say in your extracurriculars versus your essay versus your interview. You want to make sure you have a consistent storyline and that you're not trying to take on other, styles or voices or examples from other people. Again, all unintentionally, but that's what can happen when we go a little too far into the internet or something to start looking. You want to be strategic about what you're looking at, and again, ask for different perspectives if someone thinks that it is worth looking into. The next is lack of strategy. So when you're looking at different schools, whether that's Columbia or Yale, they're going to have different types of questions. Some are going to have a primary essay with supplementals. Others are going to have, 3 primary essays. If you are writing about certain topics, sometimes you can look back and realize the topics or the examples you gave, they don't fit your brand. They're not fitting your storyline. They may even detract or go against something in your extracurriculars or your goals. Sometimes you can find that you're repeating yourself. That is very common. Again, we all have a limited number of years of experience and within our roles and responsibilities. And especially if you've been in the same industry or in a similar role for years, you often can find yourself using the same examples for different questions, and you want to try to avoid that or offer different insights and perspectives into the same example throughout your essays. So having strategy, especially when you're considering the writing and which schools to apply to and which rounds, all of that is vital. Otherwise, you're going to become very overwhelmed very quickly. For resume rhetoric, your essay, it's not a job interview. So don't use it as a way of, hammering home all the accomplishments you've done, things like that. We mentioned this back when we were talking about the essay tips. And the goal here is for the essay, it is for them to get to know you, not for them to get to know your resume even better. So also lack of focus. This again goes back especially to the essay tips, but it can be in general throughout the application process. It can be tempting to try to squeeze in as many examples as possible or as many accomplishments into something, and realize that you're not actually answering the question that they've asked, or that you're not approaching, again, your extracurriculars in a focused way or strategized way. Because yes, there is a strategy. Some of you asked this on the resume, how you're presenting those extracurriculars. I think someone had asked, the various titles you can use. While some schools do have a particular format that they prefer, many schools are going to leave that more flexible, whether it's a resume or a CV. And again, if you're applying to schools like LBS versus somewhere like MIT or Stanford, those are going to be different types of resumes or CVs. They're going to be presented differently. And what your biggest accomplishments are, that could be within leadership, it could be within revenue goals, it could be community service. There are different titles and different ways of strategizing that. And it's important to, again, have strategy and focus when you are doing all these things. So these are just some highlights of what to avoid as you're kind of going through the process. And again, it's why it can be good to have a partner with you doing this, whether that is your actual partner, whether that's a friend or a consultant or a coach, because they are going to be the ones to help, keep you on track and be able to be that other set of eyes, making sure you're not repeating yourself or that you're having a consistent brand or storyline throughout your application. And Puneet, if you have anything to add, awesome. But I know we also have questions we need to get to. So
a lot of them. We're going to be tackling all the questions in just a bit. Just before we jump onto the questions, we'll close the loop, help you walk through the process that MBA and Beyond follows for MBA applications that you're targeting, especially for top schools. So I'm going to talk about a little bit first to understand what it really takes to pull off a great narrative and a great application before you even start thinking about what schools you want to apply to. So one of the things that a lot of candidates struggle with is the clarity of vision or the clarity of understanding of what is their goal. Everybody, 90% of you, I'm sure you want to be management consultants, but that's not sufficient enough to land you into a top business school. I mean, that makes your application more and more generic. Why do you want to do management consulting? What is your vision with that? How would you position yourself as a global business leader to solve a real world challenge? That's what's going to make you look outstanding. You need to, first of all, start talking about how do you position yourself as a global business leader and not just your personal growth. You need to start thinking from admissions committee perspective. What do they care about? They care about their career statistics. They care about how are they going to put your picture out there on this like alumni page and what are they going to be proud of? So whenever you're like thinking about your application, you need to have a very strong narrative. And for that, we've defined a framework that we call content gathering phase. This is something, or this is, you can call it an introspection phase or a reflection phase. We like to call it content gathering phase. It is broken down into 3 sets. So anytime any applicant comes on board with us, this is a pre-work that we do with all our applicants, takes a good amount of 15 days before we jump on to working on your essays. This phase is split into 3 sets. Set 1 revolves around very high level questions around core and fundamentals of any business school, no matter what business school you're applying to. So we made it very simple for you by helping you answer a couple of questions. There are 12 main questions and 40 sub-questions, very simplified for you to help you brain dump yourself as honestly as possible and arrive at a conclusion. How do you picture yourself as a global business leader? So you're going to be answering questions around what are the most impactful evidences in your life that showcase you as a leader. What is your vision with an MBA? How do you position yourself as a global business leader? What's your short-term goal? What's your long-term goal? What's your vision with an MBA? What's your midterm goal? How do you connect it to your current experience? What is this real world challenge that you care about? I want to say something out loud here in this forum. Business schools really like very passionate individuals with strong personalities trying to bring an impact in this world using MBA as a tool. If you're able to craft a story which has passion, personality, impact, and you position why MBA within this particular sentence, you are always in, no matter the GMAT score, if you've like cut through this. And we've seen great successes even with low GMAT scores, when this passionate line that I'm talking about is clearly portrayed in your application. So this is set one, but this is you thinking from only your perspective in one dimension. We want to also understand you from other people's perspective, from another dimension, so that we could remove any self-bias in your application. It's very likely you will either undersell yourself or oversell yourself if you are just trying to think from your own perspective for your application. Business schools have a knack of identifying self-biases in your application. We, as your facilitator, need to make sure there are no self-biases. One of the examples that I can give is a lot of schools ask you about your questions around your strengths, weaknesses, achievements, and failures. You will notice that you have a lot of examples to support your strengths and achievements, but when it comes to your weaknesses and failures, you kind of try to defend yourself because we're only human and we end up doing that. So we need to make sure that we're coming as honestly and as self-bias free as possible in our applications. For that, we ask you to choose 3 really important people in your life: 1 personal connection, 1 professional connection, and the third one could be either of them. We collect some information on your personality, your experiences with them, your strengths, weaknesses from their perspective, and you'd be surprised the number of times you're going to go back to this content to make your application foolproof and self-bias free for admissions committee to read. Some applicants are clever enough that they already get their recommenders to do this bit for them. So even before you start crafting your letters of recommendation or your essays, you kind of already have an idea what your recommenders are going to be talking about. So you can completely plug your recommendations with your essays, and you can make it look like very, very complementary to your resume and your essays. So that's set 2. Then we move on to set 3. This is where I personally believe that magic really happens. Here we put you through a personality test. Elena has completely stressed on the fact that you need to bring out your personality. You're not just your professional self, and business schools want to know you as a person. They want to know your personality traits that they can resonate with, which are also close to their core values. And that's how they do the matchmaking with you and the values of the business school and pick you as an appropriate candidate they want to graduate the next year or the year after. So you need to make sure you bring out your personalities out loud in your application. For that, we're going to put you through a personality test. And based on the results of the test, we define the traits that become the backbone of your application, and everything else that you've done or collected, content that you've gathered in set 1 and set 2 is going to hang around it as a supporting piece of evidence. Now, this is content gathering phase. This journey you take with a content gathering specialist who's also a psychology specialist, and make sure that you get an honest and a free environment for you to be as honest as possible about yourself without being deviated from the path of an application that you're trying to write. So this is a space for you to be as honest and as free as you can be in the direction of a top business school application. Once all of this content is gathered, your consultant comes in. Your consultant is an alum of an M7 or at least one of the top 10 business schools. They have the understanding of what it really takes to mentor applicants like you to make it to a top business school. Some of them are actually working with MBBs, and they have the knack of pitching stories to Fortune 500 companies, and they've been doing that for years. Some of them are Silicon Valley startup founders, and they know how to relate to an entrepreneurial person. So that's how we match you to the consultant who's closest to the journey that you are taking or you want to take post-MBA. Once the match happens, the consultant goes through all the content that you've gathered, goes into a brainstorming session with you, understands you in and out, and prepares a 1-pager branding document for you. This is called your branding document. It has your high-level storyline, your theme, your strategy, and your direction for business schools. If you're struggling to pick schools at this stage, and if you are still unsure, okay, what schools should I apply to? I only have limited time. I can only apply to 5, or I can only apply to 7. Do not worry. Take the content gathering phase first. You will have so much clarity, and your consultant will be able to see you clearly in different schools because they know your story in and out. So this is the moment to pick the schools where you have the highest potential of converting. And like Puneet and Elena said, it's important for you to hedge your bets that's applied to a couple of dream schools, couple of realistic schools, and a couple of safe schools if you really want to go to business school this year. So we help you pick schools, and once, of course, the schools have been picked, then the consultant and you start working together on your essays. They hold your hand, give you complete direction. In 3 to 4 iterations, you'll realize that your essays are stellar. With your letters of recommendation, we also help you understand what are the key pointers that your recommenders should be talking about, which goes hand in hand with your resume and your essay. Always remember, a recommendation can never be a repetition or a duplication of your essay or resume. It has to be a complementary piece of evidence that's going to make your case stronger in front of the admissions committee. So once recommendation is sorted via LOR mapping, we also help you with your resume because it also has to align with your story. We help you with your video interviews. And finally, if you make it to the final round, we help you prepare with a lot of, do a lot of mock sessions unless you're more prepared than what we expect the interviewer to ask. If you're applying for early action or early decision round, so to say, your interview preparation will already start soon after you finish your content gathering because you are short going for an interview invite. There are a couple of questions around early action round. Maybe we'll start with that quickly and then we jump on to more questions. We have good 10 minutes to tackle your questions. So just jumping on. Somebody I just saw was asking, Akshit is asking, is there any catch for early action rounds which offer a guaranteed interview? This is being offered by a few schools. So I'll wrap this one up and then more questions for you, Puneet and Elena. Yes, there is one. They want for you to have the confidence that you are going to be joining the cohort or not, because the chances for early action are definitely doubled. So some of the schools are going to ask you to sign like a binding offer. So you may need to put in like a deposit. Schools like Columbia do that I know for sure. Some schools ask you to put in that kind of deposit and lock in your seat that yes, you are going to be applying to only the school and you're going to go to the school. You can read and research a little more. Otherwise, we're also happy to answer more questions. You can schedule a call with us. We can talk about this in detail. But yes, early action rounds do give you an opportunity to have like double your chances for any admits, especially to top schools like Tuck and Columbia, Duke, Darden. All right, that's me then. Okay, a question for Elena and Puneet. Elton is asking, so he wants to become a management consultant. Darden versus Booth versus Sloan MBA. How would you prioritize the options considering working in consulting space post MBA?
I think one of the best things to consider when you're prioritizing, especially within consulting, because there are so many, distinctions and specifications within the type of consulting you want to do, is really be clear on the types of companies you're going to work with post MBA or what you're going to want to do with that management consulting. Make sure those companies are recruiting or have a strong presence at those schools. Again, most of the top schools are going to have a very large presence in terms of recruiters. However, certain industries are better represented at certain schools, whether it's finance, management consulting, tech, any of those. You can consult with any of those areas, but the types of companies you want are going to have a stronger presence at some schools rather than others, and especially where you want to do or what you want to do post MBA and where you want to do that. That is also going to be very important. Not all schools have as recognized a global presence with various companies and recruiters. So if you are going to want to do something more global and not just say stay in the US, then you're going to want to look into that as well.
Thanks, Elena. Anything, Puneet, you'd like to add, or should I jump on to the next question?
No, let's take the next one. I think.
All right. Cool. Simmer has a question. As a first generation entrepreneur, who do we take our LORs from? That's a good question. And second one is, I want to understand if quitting my own venture to pursue an MBA is a viable option. Anybody wants to take? Yeah, Puneet, go on.
Yeah, no, I think second one is again more personal, right? At what stage your venture is, can you sort of automate it or hand it over to someone for the time being? So you need to take that call. And do you believe, let's say, going to a business school during that 1.5 year or 2 years is going to add more value than you continuing your venture, right? That's I think that's how that's the most I can suggest. On the first one, so the way I look at the reference part, the is it doesn't really matter, what your background is. My sort of 2 cents on this is, don't aim for, a very senior person in your organization, for your reference if they cannot give specific examples about you, because it's not really about the title of the, referee. It's more about how personally they know you, whether they can cite relevant examples to demonstrate your leadership experience and how you will contribute, to the learnings of others during your MBA. That's the most important bit. As a rule of thumb, maybe one person you can take your, line manager or, immediate manager who looks after your day-to-day responsibilities. Second one could be your mentor who doesn't look at your day-to-day responsibilities, but maybe from the sides has seen you, grow in the organization or, in your professional and personal life.
Yeah, I'd like to add there because I've seen instances of people taking recommendations from their co-founders as well. So if you have a co-founder, you can get it from your co-founder. You can even get it from, like Puneet said, a mentor. If you have a mentor and advisor on board, you can take it from him. You could even ask your vendors or suppliers, or I don't know what kind of startup you have, but anybody who you constantly deal with and develop a relationship with. So these are all kind of folks that entrepreneurs take their recommendations from. I hope we answered that question for you. All right, jumping on. Okay, wow, management consulting everywhere. I mean, okay, Vaibhav asks, management consulting is the target. Confused between ISB, IIM. So Elena, just to help you understand, ISB, IIM, they are Indian top schools that most of the Indian applicants go to. ISB, IIM versus INSEAD because of ROI factor. I don't have enough savings or money. I mean, of course, so the ROI aspect of it, he's asking what should he really do for landing a job in management consulting? Indian school versus global school, that's the question.
Yeah, I can start with that. I think all the options all the schools that he has mentioned, all of these are great schools, right? Not just for MBA, but also for your post-MBA management consulting goal. On the financial side of it, I would say, don't just look at the cost aspect, but also look at your, post MBA compensation as well, right? Because, and I think MBA and Beyond, we had published an article on ROI as well. You can refer to that. But let's take the example of ISB versus INSEAD, right? You mentioned here. So for ISB, let's say cost of attendance is 40 to 50 lakh in Indian rupees versus INSEAD, let's say, is 1 CR, right? Or maybe slightly more. But then you also need to look at your post MBA compensation. Let's say if your ISB's median salary is around 30 lakh versus INSEAD's median salary probably is, north of $100,000, right? So do take that into consideration if you're only looking at it from the financial perspective. My suggestion, of course, would be to look wider. It's not just about money. If I look at it from a 30 or 35-year long career, it's also about where you want to be in the short, mid, and long term. What is the value of MBA that you see in your career, and that sort of include those factors as well.
Yep. Thanks for that advice. I hope that also answered Swati's question. She's in a dilemma for doing an MBA from India versus abroad. Of course, you have to understand your personal aspirations, do your math, ROI, everything. But if you have to eventually just come back to India after an MBA immediately, then really it requires a more serious discussion. Why do you need to get a global MBA? So happy to have a longer chat with you on that as well. Before we jump on to the next question, because we're running out of time as well, if you guys like to work with us, so we have a very serious recruiting process because we need to be successful with you guys as well, and we need to understand you more as a person, not just your professional journey. 2 questions along with your resume. Send us answer to these questions by 27th. We'll be thoroughly analyzing the applicants we want to work with, and we're closing our applications for round 1 end of this month. We really seriously need more time if you're targeting 3 or more schools for round 1 and early action round. The first question is, what personality trait, take the tips from what Elena talked about. We will be sharing the recording with you as well. What personality trait would you like to highlight the most in your application? Give an example. It could be anything. Think beyond professional lives. Second question, which schools do you want to apply to and why? So we really need to understand what's your thought process behind picking schools, or are you just like picking schools for the heck of picking schools? So have a strong reasoning behind the schools that you really want to target. Send us your answers by June 27th. The team will analyze on June 20th and we'll come back to you by EOD. We just have a minute, actually we are a minute over, and I know there are still some questions. You have link in the chat box there to schedule a session with us. We would absolutely love to tackle all the questions that have been unanswered. And let's have a one-on-one there. Thank you, Puneet, and thanks, Elena, for such an insightful session. It was a delight having you on board.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks, everyone.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining.